Turning now to the UK, which is planning to host a landmark Israeli-Palestinian peace conference set for March. The inaugural meeting of the International Fund for Israeli-Palestinian Peace is described as a crucial step towards bridging deep-seated divisions and advancing a viable two-state solution in the Middle East. Joining us now by Zoom is John Lyndon, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. Good evening to you, excuse me. Good evening to you. Let's talk about this. This was a pledge made by the Prime Minister of the UK to try to support an international peace fund. Has this been something high on the agenda this whole time before actually having a date and a plan?
Yeah, and thank you. Very good to be with you. It's an idea with deep roots. We at the Alliance for Middle East Peace, ALLMEP, we're the largest network of Israeli and Palestinian civil society peace builders. And we've been calling for such a fund for a decade and a half now, really, modeled off a similar fund that really helped to build the foundations necessary for peace in Northern Ireland. We had seen the United Kingdom previously endorse the concept back under a Conservative government in 2018, when Alistair Burt, who was the Middle East minister at the time, announced the support in the House of Commons. But really, I think the devastation of the last 2 years of this war, the devastation and violence that we saw, the lack of humanity on October 7th, really demonstrated to international policymakers the need for urgent intervention. And the fact that, there is obviously an elite level policy conversation and a need for meaningful diplomacy. But realistically, we also need population, civil society and both societies that can support and sustain a real peace process and can then actually develop the relationships, the ideas, the leaders that true peace requires. And we met with Prime Minister Starmer about a year ago now, actually, where he made the pledge. And then we were delighted this week to see statements from both the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, so the Finance Minister in the United Kingdom, saying this conference, as you mentioned, will take place in March. And hopefully very soon the fund will be created and do a world of good for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Now, as far as getting, all of these different people together when, in the UK, hasn't exactly been quiet over the past, 2 years. It's been one of the more, places that we've seen with a lot of flare-ups and anti-Israel protests and whatnot. So how did they manage to get all these different groups and people to actually, come together and have these discussions?
It's interesting. There's obviously a lot of polarization around this issue. And the main reason to create this fund, to be super clear, is to transform the reality amongst Israelis and Palestinians. But one additional benefit is that it can actually create a different message for people internationally, where they can be in solidarity with both Israelis and Palestinians who share values and who are working towards peace and equality and security for both peoples. And that is part, I think, of the rationale for wanting to do this. It's a smaller part. But we also found, we ran some polling last week, coincidentally, before this announcement, and we found that 84% of British citizens who expressed an opinion supported creating this fund, and 73% actually supported contributing at least £10 million towards it. And what we have found in our advocacy over many years is that you get a huge majority, really, of pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian sensible people, around 70% of those who feel strongly about the issue, who might disagree on certain issues. They agree on the need to build these civil society movements, to have an opportunity for Israelis and Palestinians to work together, to address the deep trauma, to build trust and understanding. We've actually led on legislation that passed in the United States called MEPA, the NIDA MLOE Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, that worked on the same idea, where we had Republicans and Democrats agreeing that this sort of funding was a priority, even though they very often disagreed on a lot of other issues.
So what would be the stated goal of, coming out of, this conference again set for March? I mean, what would be goals in like the immediate months to come versus years? Are they talking about short-term and long-term plans or wishes?
Such a great question, because it's both, right? You need things in the short term, definitely. We have to address the trauma that existed in both societies, develop gradually the trust that I mentioned, which is a long-term agenda, develop new policy ideas, I would say, as well. Very often Israelis develop policy ideas, Palestinians develop policy ideas. They don't really survive contact with the other society. So having Israelis and Palestinians together, thinking up new and innovative ways to address how they're going to work and live together in this land in safety and security, that's a priority. I'm hoping in London in March, we have Israelis and Palestinians together doing just that. We convened Israelis and Palestinians in Paris this summer, And we had hundreds of ideas that came from civil society leaders. So there's no shortage of those ideas. The other thing I hope we see is governments commit resources, that we see the UK, but other governments as well weigh in and say, you know what, we want to contribute towards this, particularly because of the long-term point that you made. We're seeing a lot of transition and change in Israel, with the Palestinians, internationally as well, lots of elections and governments coming and going. We need a single institution taking a long-term approach to build over a generation what is required for conflict resolution. And if we get the funds committed, this institution can, yes, invest in those short-term ideas, but can also say, what are we doing now to prepare people who are 12 right now in both societies to be fully formed adults that know each other and that can work together and safeguard real peace for both peoples? That can't happen if a single government has an eye on this, with all due respect to all of these donor countries. But it can happen if you have a single institution that is narrowly focused on that mission. My hope is that that is what is created in London in March.
One other question. I mean, clearly these are all really the best of intentions of people that, seem to be reasonable and at least able to sit down and have a dialogue, even if they could agree to disagree. But, there have been security concerns. I mean, I imagine this is, something, a group this large getting together. I imagine that has to be a big part of the planning, because you don't know what kind of outliers may show up.
My hope and belief is that we have to take obviously adequate security steps and make sure we're safeguarding everybody's safety. I mean, I will say, sort of parenthetically, when we had hundreds of Israelis and Palestinians in Paris in the summer, it happened to sadly coincide with the beginning of the Iranian-Israel war on June 13th. So we had really, really significant security concerns. I really hope are not mimicked in March of next year, but we did manage to ensure everybody's safety and security and their return to the Middle East. I think the other sort of implicit point that you're making is around security in the region for Israelis and Palestinians to be able to meet together at scale. It's wonderful to have people come to London or Paris and have meetings, but it's really not ideal. We have plenty of places people can meet between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, and we'd like to make sure that we can have more opportunities in safety and security for Israelis and Palestinians to have those encounters, have those meetings, build those relationships. I would note that there were, before October 7th, thousands of permits issued to Palestinians to be able to enter Israel and participate in these programs. They have a perfect security record. If you speak to people at COGAT, they will tell you that not only has there been no instances of violence from participants who have these permits, they actually enhance security because they help Israelis and Palestinians build trust and relationships. I would really hope that now we have a ceasefire in place, those permits are reinstituted again. I would note also that in the 20-point plan that President Trump released in October, point 18 talks about an interreligious dialogue, and that this is going to be a component within both societies to fight the dehumanization that we've sadly seen rise in recent years. And that's not going to be possible unless those permits are put back in place and we give an opportunity with safety and security in mind for a new generation of Israelis and Palestinians to meet each other and build gradually those relationships and trust that real conflict resolution requires.
Wow, so interesting. Thank you so much, John Lyndon, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, and I'm sure it will be a huge success.